when these 49 incidents are disaggregated, aggregated, and examined one by one, as the statute requires, we submit, what becomes apparent is not the cumulative strength, rather the recurrence of certain symptoms of inherent weakness in the evidence. These weaknesses fall into 6 broad categories. The first is the over-heavy reliance on the testimony of cooperating witnesses who are inherent criminals with an inherent propensity to be unreliable and whose statements, as I mentioned, are not corroborated by external evidence. The second, hearsay attribution, or in less legal parlance, incriminating statements heard from a source twice or even 3 times removed. The third weakness, which infects the evidence, is the fact that some of the victims are unidentified, making it virtually impossible for the defense to pursue its own lines of inquiry. This weakness affects at least 9 out of the 49 incidents. The fourth weakness, documentary records, such as police and forensic reports, are at variance with and are contradicted by testimony of a single prosecution witness. Fifth, the hoary old chestnut of conflicting statements emanating from 2 or more witnesses testifying to the same event, some contradicting one another, some contradicting even themselves. And finally, the 6th weakness being the repeated absence of any evidence to link the hitmen to our client, despite the prosecution's best efforts to chivvy such linkage out of them. The defense will now show how these identified weaknesses reduce below the substantial grounds threshold the evidence for these incidents in the 3 counts as they appear in the document containing the charges. Count 1, the alleged murders during the mayoral period. Count 2, alleged murders of HVTs, the high-value targets, during the presidential period. And count 3, barangay clearance operations also during the presidential period. So I shall start with count 1. As we know, the first cluster of incidents falling under count 1 concerns the so-called and totally fictitious Davao Death Squad period. This concerns incidents 1 through 9 of the document containing the charges. The prosecution's attribution theory here is straightforward, that Rodrigo Duterte, as mayor, authorized killings through intermediaries. But when the evidence for this count is examined, as I've already mentioned, not one witness can say that he heard the mayor give an order to kill. The attribution of criminality to Mr. Duterte arises, for the most part, out of assumption layered on top of hearsay, and follows a repetitive pattern which would, as a rule, entail the same mechanism of attribution. Namely, a hitman witness for the prosecution would state that his handler said that clearance came from, and I quote, above. But what does the word above mean? It means an unnamed superior and nothing more. The mode of liability imputed to Mr. Duterte, namely indirect perpetration, requires the prosecution to establish a stable chain of command through which the common enterprise filtered. If there indeed existed a structured approval process as the prosecution alleges, one would expect operational consistency, not variability. The incidents contained in Count 1 are also marked by internal inconsistencies which cannot be reconciled and which are indicative of the fragility of the prosecution's overall case. Incident number 1, for example, is based on the evidence of 2 witnesses who contradict each other on fundamental and materially crucial issues. Let me explain in more detail. P26, who presents himself as a participant, claims that Mr. Duterte telephoned a redacted third party to order the operation and was told that it was the mayor on the phone. Was told that the mayor was on the phone. Pure hearsay. The prosecution seeks to reinforce this through P2. Yet P2 was not present at the time. He was inactive, for reasons I can't mention, and relies entirely on what he heard from the redacted third party and another individual at a later date. P2's account is therefore pure, unadulterated hearsay. More significantly, it diverges from P26's version on fundamental points. The year of the incident, 2014 and not 2013. The number of victims, 2 rather than 3. The identity of the perpetrators. The channel through which alleged clearance was conveyed, via driver and bodyguard, to a different DDS member rather than through redacted. And if that is not enough, the method of killing, strangulation rather than stabbing, these aren't minor inconsistencies. They concern the core factual matrix. If the pre-trial chamber is unable to determine even these basic circumstances which establish opportunity, method for the one-time, big-time operation. Now, I ask you, how can P3 have been operating under a clear criminal direction to target drug users for murder, criminals for murder, when he states that on occasion he would perform so-called clean arrests? Prosecution's witness, P3. He's not clear when he's actually following their supposed criminal theory or when he's is. What are clean arrests? These are arrests subsequent to which the apprehended criminal would be handed over for a judicial process. And so with that, I believe, I have exhausted the first limb of the objective requirement for indirect co-perpetration and have shown conclusively that there was no mutually agreed common criminal plan. Madam President, there are 10 minutes to go. I will start with the concept of essential contribution, which is indeed the second limb that I want to talk about with respect to this mode of liability, which requires the prosecution to show objectively that Mr. Duterte himself made an essential contribution to the furtherance of this scheme of criminality, and what is more, that subjectively he was aware that he was making such a contribution. This is what us Latin-speaking lawyers, would call the sine qua non test. Or to put it another way, did these 49 murders, which the prosecution has identified, occur specifically because of Rodrigo Duterte's involvement. Or, to make the logic a whole lot simpler, would Rodrigo Duterte's